Recording in progress.
Those with comments are invited to approach the podium. Those participating on Zoom, I don't know what happened. Zoom will need to do the raised hand feature to indicate they wish to comment. The chair may choose to alternate. This is so annoying. Yeah, it's coming through here. Is that better? No.
Can you mute the computer?
All right, we'll work on this. The chair may choose to alternate between in-person and online commenters. Please begin your comments by stating your name and city of residence. You'll have 2 minutes to speak. All right. Is there anyone? Hello. Can you please state your name and the city that you reside?
Yeah, my name is Dylan Sindrich. I live in Provo in the Timp neighborhood.
I just have a couple comments that I want to make in response to some comments that I heard and sentiments that were expressed during the city council work meeting earlier today during the discussion about affordable housing. I'm very glad and I want to express my appreciation to the council that they're looking into this issue and taking it seriously. As a renter in Provo who's looking to purchase a home, thank you. I do have a couple concerns, however, about the approach that's being taken so far. While down payment assistance programs and deed restrictions are valuable tools which can help some people to find affordable housing options, they do not actually create affordable housing. They only help certain individuals to be able to afford already expensive housing. These kinds of programs are limited in their reach and do not solve the core problem that housing in a community is simply too expensive for the people that live there. A lack of affordable housing is an issue of supply and demand. People want to live in Provo because of our strong economy, our beautiful scenery, and our family-friendly atmosphere. Because we have strong demand for housing in Provo. Because supply is not increasing to match demand, prices are high. Unless we want to tank our economy and lower demand, the best way to keep housing prices low is to increase the supply of housing. If you are truly serious about making housing affordable within Provo, you should first and foremost be looking at how to increase the supply of housing in Provo. I have one last thought in response to a comment made by Councillor Fillmore that it is not a city's responsibility to build housing for everyone that wants to live there. Provo is a better place when people of different socioeconomic backgrounds and in different stages of life can all live within our community. By saying we are not interested in increasing the supply of housing, we are effectively saying we are not interested in providing housing for people that don't meet a certain economic threshold. I do not believe that would be in line with the values that make Provo such a great city, and I would urge the council to not take up that stance in regards to affordable housing. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Eric.
Hi, my name is Eric Chase. I live in Provo. It's been a couple of weeks since I last sent the council an email regarding the parking lot at Exchange Park, and I wanted to give you an update on what's happened since then. So it's been painted with lines. It's now over 36,500 square feet of parking, and 107 parking spaces have been built at Exchange Park. There's two problems with this. There's one, it's just a huge waste of space and resources to have built this giant parking lot in this little park. And two, the process that we went by to get to this point. Just if you haven't been out there yet, here's some comparisons to how huge the parking lot is. The new Rotary Park on Grandview Hill is opening soon with 8 pickleball courts and 4 tennis courts, playground, all the fanciest new amenities, and they have 48 parking spaces. So we have almost 60 parking spaces more just for the 2 small pavilions. I went and measured an apartment complex today nearby, Fifth Avenue Apartments. Their lot is 34,000 square feet. It holds 24 apartments, pavilions, a dog park, their dumpster space, and 50 parking spaces. That's the kind of space we're giving up by having this giant parking lot. And one of the responses we got from, and I think most of the council got from the Parks Department, said neighborhood comments drove us to respond to pavilion, trail, and park usage numbers. The enhanced parking lot and configuration now better meets visitor demands placed at the park. I completed a grammar request with the city. In the past 5 years, there's only been 1 complaint about parking around that park in the surrounding area. So that is not up to the standard. I compare it to what's happened at Rotary Park on Grandview recently, all the citizen committees and involvement you've had up there. And it's a stark contrast to a single complaint paving, a quarter acre of our park space. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other comments? All right, we will move on to an applied motion on a resolution consenting to the appointment of individuals to various boards and commissions. And this will be presented by Wayne Parker, our Chief Administrative Officer.
Madam Chair, council members, thank you for the opportunity. The mayor has recommended the following reappointments to Provo City boards and commissions, as well as an additional appointment to the Housing Authority Board as indicated below, and submits this for the council's advice and consent. First of all, Darren Smith, the mayor is recommending that Darren be reappointed to a 3-year term on the Arts Council ending June 30, 2026. Emily Campbell, the mayor is recommending Emily be reappointed to a 3-year term on the Arts Council ending June 30, 2026. Margaret Weber, the mayor is recommending Margaret be appointed to a 3-year term on the Arts Council ending June 30, 2026. Thomas Taylor, the mayor is recommending Tom be reappointed to a 3-year term on the Arts Council, also ending June 30, 2026. Jen Peterson, the mayor is recommending Jen be reappointed to a 3-year term on the Parks and Recreation Board, ending June 30th, 2026. Tom Sataki, the mayor is recommending Tom be reappointed to a 3-year term on the Parks and Recreation Board, ending June 30, 2026. And then a new appointment, Abraham Hernandez. Abraham has a rich history of being involved in the community and is currently the Chief Communications Officer at Centro Hispano. The mayor is recommending Abraham be appointed to a 4-year term on the Housing Authority Board ending June 30th, 2027. Any questions?
Thank you, Wayne. Any questions for Wayne?
Okay,
Thank you. Any council discussion? We have lots of visitors here today. Just so you know, there's multiple boards on the city that you can apply to be on. These are just a few of them, but that's all on the city website if it interests you. Okay, we will call for a vote on the implied motion. Chair McKay, yes. Vice Chair Whipple?
Yes.
Councillor Ellsworth is excused. Councillor Fillmore?
Yes.
Councillor Handley?
Yes.
Councillor Shipley?
Yes.
And Councillor Hoban?
Yes.
For the record, that's unanimous with 6 of us, with Ellsworth excused. Next, we have an implied motion on a resolution amending the 2023 council regular meeting schedule. And this will be presented by Justin Harrison, the council executive director.
Good evening, council. As you're aware, there has been a change to the primary and general election schedule. This happened just in the last couple of weeks, and notices and declarations were sent out by the governor as well as the lieutenant governor as to how municipalities would proceed with their primary and general elections with the at the time unknown change to Congressional District 2, which will be filling a vacancy for a representative. So we've made a couple of changes to the council meeting schedule to coincide with those dates. So as you'll see in the exhibits and what I believe is on the screen behind me, is we've set a date for our Truth and Taxation meeting on August 8th. The old primary election day was August 15th. That is no longer. As there's no primary election on the 15th, there's no need for a Board of Canvassers meeting on August 29th. Primary election day has been moved to September 5th. And there will be a council night and work meeting as previously scheduled. Because September 5th is the primary election day, the council will meet as the Board of Canvassers in conjunction with their council night and work meetings on September 19th. General election day was previously the second Tuesday in November 7th, and that has been changed to November 21st. So we have canceled our previously scheduled work and council meeting as to not be on the same day as the new general election day. With the move of general election day to November 21st, we will also need to hold a Board of Canvassers meeting. And there's been a slight change to the original materials that were sent out. Just this past Friday, the state put on a training for municipalities that are having elections, and we were informed by the recorder, who has been so helpful in all of this. I feel the worst for Heidi, but she has been great through all of these changes and keeping us up to date. But the state is giving counties an extra day because to count ballots, because general election is falling on the 21st and Thanksgiving is 2 days later. So we will hold our Board of Canvassers meeting on Wednesday, December 6th, as opposed to Tuesday, the 5th. So we tried to make as few of changes to the calendar as possible. Really, we're eliminating one meeting and adding our Truth and Taxation meeting on August 8th to try to make this work as best as possible. But happy to answer any questions. And we'll go from there.
Thanks, Justin. Any questions for Justin? Counselor Hanley.
Just a quick one on the December 6th. That's a Wednesday, you said?
Correct.
What's the time on that? How long? I just can't remember what that typically requires.
So as it's just the Board of Canvassers that will be meeting, it should be fairly short. We had talked initially in council leadership about just doing it via Zoom, since this will be a short meeting.
Okay.
So, and I would imagine it'll be at our normal time.
Thank you. All right, any discussion about this item? All right, we will take a vote on the implied motion. Counselor Whipple.
Yes.
Counselor Ellsworth is excused. Counselor Fillmore.
Yes.
Counselor Hanley.
Yes.
Counselor Shipley.
Yes.
Counselor Hoban.
Yes.
And myself, McKay, yes. Thank you. And that is
Perfect.
unanimous. Great. With Ellsworth excused. We're going to take a little break as they think they're going to fix our screen here.
We'll get that updated on everyone's calendars as well.
Thank you. All right, thank you. All right, we're going to move on to an implied motion on a resolution approving an interlocal cooperative agreement regarding the Provo Municipal Airport Terminal. And this will be presented by Brian Jones, the city attorney.
Thank you, Chair McKay, councilors. This is an item where there's been some money that was approved as a grant to the city for the construction of the airport terminal that's already been constructed, as I understand it. So it's a reimbursement grant where it's $15 million total, $4 million that can be given to us this year and 11 that can be given to us next year. And this is a resolution accepting the money. So happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? All right, thanks, Brian. Council discussion. All right, we will take a vote on the implied motion. Counselor Ellsworth is excused. Counselor Fillmore.
Yes.
Counselor Handley.
Yes.
Counselor Shipley.
Yes.
Counselor Hoban.
Yes.
I myself, McKay, yes. Counselor Whipple.
Yes.
That's unanimous, 6-0 with Ellsworth excused. Next, an implied motion on ordinance amending Provo City Code regarding the location of boats, recreational vehicles, and trailers. This is a citywide application, and it will be presented to us by Abinadi Borja, our Senior Code Compliance Officer.
Thank you, Chair McKay. Thank you, councilors. So with this, I can move it. Sweet. I'm going to go on to my points. I have 5 points to present to you today. The first one, which to our team is the most important one, is equitable enforcement on all trailers. The code used to only specifically focus on certain types of trailers. We wanted to focus on equitable enforcement on all trailers. The second one addresses parking, where parking can be located and where it can't be located on your screen. There are certain areas where we feel like it is allowed and other areas where we feel like it wouldn't be allowed. The third one is yards and definitions, to be able to make it more clear with yards and defining trailers, defining boats and other items that weren't in our definitions before we included them there. This illustration, which is actually an old illustration, but with this illustration, it defines exactly three types of properties that we would see. To explain it more clearly, this illustration is a copy of an illustration that is in the standard for public works. So to make it easy for us, that's why this is as it is, and it's not really addressing other properties that we see in the city. But our focus is not so much focusing on all properties, it's just saying, this is the front yard, these are the side yards, this is the rear yard. And then the last thing that we wanted to address was occupancy. We saw that there were a lot of occupancy concerns throughout the city, people allowing other people, guests, family, friends to live in the RVs, which is the common case. So we addressed occupancy there as to allow it for a temporary basis. Those were the 5 points that we wanted to address with this code. Do you have any questions?
Counselor Whipple.
It's just occurred to me that I don't know how an alley would fit into this.
As in a public alley or a private alley?
There's an alley behind my house. I don't know if it's public or private, but how are alleys treated as different streets or a different type of street for this purpose?
Great question. Alleys would be treated, unless if it's owned privately by a private owner, would be treated as a public street.
But you don't get the same side street yard requirements with an alley, because the whole purpose is your parking back there and your access to your property, right?
Right. If there is not a defined yard for the alley would be treated as a street.
Oh. I'm gonna have to learn more about this later. Not in this conversation, but now my curiosity is piqued.
Sounds good.
Any other questions for Benedict? Counselor Hoban.
Well, now I want to see if we can pull up on Google Maps this alley, because I mean, you technically would not be able to park a trailer in your backyard then. You would consider it a backyard. But for purposes of this, it would be considered a street. And so it would be considered a street side yard.
Yeah, because I live on a corner and I've got an alley, then I would be considered to have streets on 3 sides. I wouldn't be able to park anything anywhere.
Except your one side yard.
I don't think there's a question there for you.
Okay, I was waiting for one.
I do appreciate how much time you've taken with this, Benedict. I know we received tons of emails about this, and I know you've responded with me multiple times on people's questions and clarification. I appreciate that. The Planning Commission also spent a lot of time on this. Any other questions? Oh, all right. Thanks, Benedict.
Thank you.
Okay, we are going to open up this item for public comment, and I'm expecting that's why we have such an awesome audience here tonight. So as you come up, please state your name and your city of residence. We have to write in the records all of your names. So please state your names clearly. And if they're tricky, maybe even spell them for the benefit of the recorder. Thank you. Don't all come at once. Come, yeah.
My name is Christy Jensen, Kristi, and I live in Provo. And I am, we have had a beautifully maintained house in our neighborhood, and the owners passed away. They lived there for many years, and the new owners have not taken care of the property at all. They've rebuffed offers from the neighbors to help them with the sprinkling system, with the lawn. They even told us that they had no intention of watering the lawn or even taking care of it. Within the past year, they moved in a recreational trailer along the south side of the house on the lawn, destroying the landscaping. And people live in that trailer on a permanent basis, and it's on a corner lot, and it's unsightly and detracts from the neighborhood. They got tired of emptying the sewer container, and they started running the sewer out onto the ground. From the sidewalk, I could see the waste dripping out onto the ground. And then they DIY tapped into the city sewer line. I was incredulous that they would even consider letting the sewer drip, because that's such a health hazard. And they ran the electricity from the house with extension cords. Well, recently they pulled in another recreational trailer. This one is on a fifth wheel. It's on the north side of the property. People live there on a permanent basis. I don't know what they're doing with their sewer. It's at the back of the property. It looks like a trailer court, and it's trashy and unkept. But the situation on the corner detracts from the neighborhood, lowers our property values, and seems unsafe with all the electrical cords. When we live as closely as we do in the city, we have to have consideration for our neighbors. I grew up on a farm. Our neighbors were a mile away. It didn't really matter what happened. So I urge you to consider this ordinance, because it will make a huge difference in our neighborhood.
Thank you, Christy.
Annette Noreen, I live in Provo. And I've emailed you about this too, but so what I don't like is that the restrictions on utility trailers in particular, because like people use them daily and stuff, and if they've got the short driveways, they're unable to park them most of them in their driveways. But I do like that they're being more lenient on allowing boats and recreational vehicles to be a little bit more into the front yard. But especially like the 12.5 setback for those utility trailers. Pretty much if you've got those 20-foot minimum driveway, you can't use them. I mean, even like if you have somebody come to tear off your roof, they can't even park a utility trailer in your driveway while they do that, because if you've got one of those short driveways, because it'll be illegal. And so I just feel like this with utility trailers, it's wrong to change those rules and make it more restrictive. And then I guess my other issue, which I've sent to you already, is has to do with the illustrations. It seems like to me that those illustrations don't represent the majority of the homes in the Provo City. They seem to remind me of a lot of the pioneer, in homes in pioneer neighborhoods with really yards and stuff. They don't have, and so I would like to see them be more representative of the typical houses in the neighborhood or in the city. And also there's no examples of paved areas. In the planning commission, they talked about like some paved areas in front of the side yards where they might park trailers, but have access to pull them forward. But there was no examples of that in those illustrations. So you wouldn't know that was applicable. And the other thing I have is in the illustrations is make the definitions match. I actually emailed you about this concerning the rear yard. The rear yard is defined in 14.620 as being across the full width of the lot. And
thank you. You must be Annette.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. I did just email you. We just, everyone, if this is your first time, we will be responding to the specifics at the end of everyone speaks, just so you know, Annette. And Abinadi, I figure you're making notes on the things that you need to correct. Okay, great. All right, next.
My name's Carol Lovelace and I live in Provo. And I've lived in this neighborhood for over 68 years. And I try to keep my property looking nice. And many of the people in the area are doing the same. But the house and yard across the street on 950 West and 1340 North used to be well kept, but it's now becoming very trashy. And I have a few major concerns with this: security and neighborhood safety. This neighborhood has always felt safe and secure. As a widowed senior citizen, I place high value on knowing who my neighbors are and feeling safe with them. Having trailers arriving next door with additional people coming and going creates a feeling of being very transient, and it makes me insecure. The precedent within the neighborhood, I'm concerned that if nothing is done about the situation, it sets a precedent for occupied trailers to pop up in yards across the neighborhood. I want to live in a neighborhood instead of a trailer park. And I'm concerned about the long-term future environment of our neighborhood if this continues. The trailer and yard areas of the home across the street are unsightly in many ways. The lawn is not kept up and the weeds get 1 to 2 feet tall. It gets increasingly crowded with the additional trailers, and I have a strong concern that this is going to affect their property value. There are people who are going to buy homes in the area and they might choose other places when they see this unsightly trailer court forming. The revised ordinance would allow for homes in all neighborhoods across Provo to be well kept. We need to preserve our neighborhood and Provo and keep it a great place.
Thank you, Carol.
Mhm.
Hi, Paul Evans, I'm Provo resident. With regards to vehicles and recreational vehicles and trailers and boats, it's great in the way that this ordinance has been crafted to find a balance between property rights and then also the idea of safety and nuisances that may exist and just general neighborhood look and feel. Right now, with regards to vehicles and recreational vehicles, there's a requirement that the property have as many off-street parking spots for the vehicles and recreational vehicles as are operated from the home. And so as we start to look at trailers and boats, again, there's a need to have a requirement that the property has a spot for the storage of those boats and trailers off-street on their own property. And that's not in the proposed code. And that needs to be put in there to provide the ability to enforce when there's too many vehicles, too many boats, too many trailers, too many recreational vehicles on one property, then they have legal spots to park. Because otherwise we just turn into a shuffle game of moving cars around on the street and trailers around on the street every 72 hours. And it doesn't solve the root problem. So just make certain that every boat, trailer, vehicle, and recreational vehicle has its own designated off-street parking spot.
Thanks, Paul.
My name is Becky Smith. I live in Provo. I didn't write mine down and I should have. I live in the area where these other sisters have got up and spoke about. I've lived there since 1978. My husband and I bought our home. He worked for Provo City for 30 years. We maintained our property. We've done improvements to our home. We love our neighborhood. We try and stay within the guidelines that we're supposed to. We have a travel trailer. We park it 20 feet away from the sidewalk as required. We have recreational vehicles. We park them out of sight on the property where required. My main concern, and I've had concerns with this with zoning for over a year and a half. I'm very vocal. I've told them my concerns. And at some point I had to back away because nothing's happening. In a 3-block radius of my home, there are 5 trailers that have people living in them. That is not acceptable. It's not healthy. I want our neighborhood to be beautiful. I want our neighbors to feel safe. And there are concerns with parking, people in and out. I just hope that you'll consider all these things and not just it's a mobile home or a trailer. It's the way they're living. I've seen the sewer stretched 2 lengths over a carport and wonder, where is it draining? It's not safe. Thank you.
Thanks, Becky.
Can I speak again? Okay,
Well,
I'm Eric Chase.
Yeah, you can speak because it's about something different.
Okay, I'm Eric Chase. I live in Provo. I have a few concerns about this ordinance. There's a family in my neighborhood. They live in a small house. They're an older couple. They have a trailer parked in their backyard that, as far as I'm aware, is clean and well kept and everything. And their young daughter with her young children live in the trailer. And I know that's not an ideal situation, but with this ordinance, I believe they would be kicked out of their home. And I know we're not a big fan of substandard housing, but some of these people who we kicked out will end up with no home and be homeless. So I would suggest that your requirements of occupancy be changed to offer exclusions for people who qualify as family under the Provo City ordinances, so they would not be removed from their homes. And that could be probably enforced under the current requirements for rental dwelling licenses instead of the changes in this ordinance. Thanks.
Thanks, Eric. Any more public comment? Okay, we will open it up for council discussion. Abinadi, maybe we should have you go first. Do you want to respond specifically to, in my notes, the definition of a side yard, you can address that. And then when projects are being done, like redoing your roof, I don't know if there's anything else that you caught.
So to address the public comment for the specific property that some of the public were speaking about, I used to be the code compliance officer for that area. We made some switches. Now it belongs to someone else. But I was aware of the property and the way that the current code addresses that situation. There's really nothing that can be done. So that's one of the main reasons why we chose to make this change, to address all those concerns. So if this does pass, unless if you see something that can be changed, that'd be great, because that's going to help some of the members here today see a change on that property. The second thing was
the definition of a side yard.
Definition of a side yard. We have a definition of a side yard. We do not have a definition of a street side yard right now. Something that the Planning Commission brought up last time was to address that. So we will be looking into addressing that this year down the road.
Which
maybe.
could technically address the alley thing too. Just
Right.
a thought.
Right. It could address that. So that's something we're looking to change in the near future, this year for sure.
Okay. And then projects being done, like you're re-roofing your house or you're having landscaping done.
That's the beautiful thing about us going out to the public, addressing issues, anything that has to do with any type of violation that we see in the code. Part of our discretion as code compliance officers is to talk to them and say, hey, Counselor Hoban, not to pick on you, but I see that you have your trailer in the front yard. What are you doing with it? Like, are you using it for something? I noticed that your roof is in shambles. Are you working on it? And then Counselor Hoban would say, yeah, I'm working on my roof.
Do you know who I am? That's what I would say. No, I'm just kidding.
Working on my roof. I'm doing this. It's going to take me a couple of weeks and I'll be done. All right. Counselor Hoban, I'll be back in a couple of weeks, making sure everything's good. By that time, he'll remove it and he'll say, hey, thank you for checking up on me. So we have that discretion to be able to talk to people and they tell us their stories. We share information, go back and forth and work on a compliance state.
Okay. The only other thing I noticed is 72-hour thing. We have that rule with vehicles that there have to be a parking spot on the property. Doesn't mean they have to park it on the property. Would it make sense? What is your thought on that as far as using it the same way for recreational vehicles, trailers, and RVs?
Right. That's a great question. So I think that is understood and misunderstood in this way. And let me explain it. The way that it says right now, it says for a temporary period not to exceed 24 hours for loading and unloading purposes. So right now, if you place your trailer, any trailer on the front yard for loading or unloading purposes, you can have it there for up to 24 hours, right? The 72 hours comes from being parked on the street. So if you have it parked on the street, you can have any vehicle there for up to 72 hours. Then it has to be moved 400 feet. And then it could park around the same spot again. So with this first sentence that I read, for a temporary period not to exceed 24 hours, I know there are people out there that use their trailers for construction work, manual labor, other sorts of labor that require utility trailers. The loophole I would see if we were to add that into this current text would be they place their trailers on their front yard, whether it's the driveway or the front yard. There is no setback requirement for safety. That is expressly said in this current text, and they would do that every single day, even the weekend. A lot of people work on Saturdays, so that would happen during the weekend as well. On Sunday, they place their trailer. Monday, they go back to work. So you would be seeing a lot of trailers being parked on the front yard, which is something that we're trying to avoid. So that's why that's not included in this current text. Does that make sense?
Okay, I think we're talking about two different things. So currently, you can enforce on a home if they own 10 vehicles, but they only have 4 parking spots at their house, places to keep them off the street, right?
Vehicles would be different if you're
Right.
talking about
No,
cars,
yeah, no, I'm
vans,
just
and
making a
stuff.
comparison.
Right.
So what if you did the same thing for, say they had 2 utility things, boat, whatever we're talking about, and they had to have one in the backyard, but they had to have, the idea is they have to have, if they own 2 of them, they have to have spots, legal spots on the property, just like the car thing. I think that's what he was asking.
Only recreational vehicles are required to have a parking spot or a parking space,
Okay.
as stated in the section of code
Okay.
that was referenced.
Okay, thank you.
No other trailer.
Okay, all right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Abinadi while we have him here? Counselor Shipley.
So you heard the comment about, a situation where a family's trying to help somebody that's an immediate family member and they're in a trailer, they're occupying a trailer. Is there any circumstance where, from a code enforcement standpoint, from a public works standpoint, we could have any kind of exception basis for, can you envision any kind of exception that would make sense? Or is it just, there's no way to make it safe, there's no way to do it from a public works standpoint, and make it work to occupy trailers long-term on somebody's private property?
We believe that the section that addresses that right now actually allows for any person to temporarily occupy the RV or the trailer there, which was not given or expressed beforehand. The way we do it right now, to answer that question, is what's the definition of a family, which was brought up. So we define a family. Is the family living in the RV, or do they have friends living in the RV? And that's how we are able to address that situation right now. But then we also see in cases like it's been being expressed right now, where there's a certain house that has a couple of RVs. They have family living there, but with the other proposed sections, they are not abiding by that in regards to like sewage, for example. And we've seen a couple of those instances where they've allowed family members to be in the RVs on the property, but it's messy pretty much.
So just to clarify, under current code and even under the proposed code, we would allow for somebody's immediate family to be permanently occupying a trailer as long as it's parked correctly?
Under the proposed code, yes. Under the current code, there's nothing that addresses that.
Okay.
No, wait, we don't allow it permanently in the new code. It would be for up to a week, wasn't it?
Right.
Or was it 2 weeks? Was it 1 week or 2 weeks?
1 week. So
1 week.
up to 7 consecutive
So
days.
someone can visit and live in their trailer while they're visiting.
So immediate family cannot stay more than 1 week, no matter where the trailer is parked on a property, and inhabit someone's own RV, even if it's immediate family or something like that.
Correct.
And again, my question is, there's just from a public works standpoint, from a safety standpoint, is there any path to some kind of exception there, or is it just unacceptable from a safety and work standpoint to allow that?
If the council feels that families should be the exception to this rule and make it match the way that the family is written right now, as far as the definition is concerned, we can look into it and make that change here. The way that I'm seeing it now, it is allowing for everyone to temporarily occupy it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sympathetic. I just don't know how we would enforce it. I mean, I think once you create an opportunity where you're allowing it because we're sympathetic, given a certain situation, there's all the complicating issues like what happens to the sewage, how long is it appropriate to be okay, what neighborhoods is it allowed in, or is it anywhere, everywhere? I mean, all the stuff that we've just gone through on ADUs gets compounded by about 100% when you start talking about issues like this, because now we don't have proper utility hookups, we don't have safety concerns. You know, I just would be really, really hesitant and nervous about opening that door because I don't know how we would ever manage it. I really don't. And that's not because I'm not sympathetic. I understand some of these situations are really tender and pull our heartstrings, but I just don't know how we would deal with it.
Great. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Abinadi. Do you have another question from? Sorry, Councilor Whipple.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm looking at this. So I've just found out that one of my daughters, who's a young adult, is going to have to come back and live with us for a month. And our house is small. We don't have a bedroom for her. I would love it if I had an RV or something that she could be in while she's in that transition between one housing unit and another, because she doesn't have control over that. Can I have her pitch a tent in my backyard? Is that okay? But living in an RV would not be okay?
That's a great question. We get complaints about campers as well in the backyard, pitching tents, family members that live in the backyard, specifically because of privacy. They pinch their tents. We go talk to them, see what's going on, and address it case by case.
That's interesting. I also know that I've worked with clients coming into the Family Justice Center who are in very tenuous housing situations. And some of them have been living in little trailers and things like that, sometimes on commercial properties and parking lots, and other times in residential. And none of them were legally rented things. And those people were so vulnerable to being abused, to having huge monetary losses, and they were so desperate to be able to keep even that terrible housing. And the most frustrating thing about giving legal advice in those situations is I could not tell them any place that they could go. There was no recourse. There was no better option for them. And so I'm very sympathetic to Mr. Chase's comment that there are people for whom this is their best option. And if we take that away from them, we're only giving them worse options.
Any other comments or questions for Abinadi? Are we down to any questions, or should we go to comments?
I've just got a quick question. I
Okay,
just want to
great.
clarify.
Counselor
You said-
Henley.
You said the new ordinance is 2 weeks or 1 week?
1 week.
Yeah. Okay. That feels very short to me, but I'll talk about that later.
Counselor Hoban.
Yeah, I'm wondering if, so I'm trying to wrap my brain around this. I'm wondering if staff can pull up a map. Is that possible? Google Maps and then go to satellite mode? No, I'm not going to your house. I'm just going to a house that has an alley. I don't know whose house it is. It might have an amazing rock wall in front of it, but I'm just curious if Abinadi can answer this or help me understand. In this situation, if a house spans like from street to street, so let's say they have a double lot or something, I'm trying to think, I don't think they'd have anywhere that they could park unless it were just the driveway area, you know? So 206 East, 300 South. This is just a random house that I found with an alley. 300 South.
Scott, let us know if you want to say anything.
So in this case, that house there, and I don't know if this is a private alley or not. So I'm just hypothetically, if it's private, then we know there's a solution. But I'm trying to think in this situation, you know, there's a road on the backyard, right? And then there's a road on the front yard. There's a road on the side yard. I'm wondering where somebody could park a trailer, assuming that's not a private drive.
Right. So my understanding is that an alley is not a street. There are two different
Okay.
Public rights of way. They're both considered a public right of way, but an alley is not considered a street by definition of code.
If this were, because I do know some people
To
that
play
have
into
double
that
lots,
question,
right?
yeah. If there is another street on the back side of the property, by code, the property has two front yards and does not have a rear yard.
Mm.
And in that instance, we would have to really take a close look. I know they do exist in Provo, not a lot, but I do know
I
they
know a few
exist.
people that have double lots, but
Yeah. And so we'd have to really take a look at that. And that's,
Well,
where
they could
our
park in their
discretion comes
driveway
into play.
though, as long as it was 12 feet back, right?
Right.
And this one on the alley, you're saying they could park
No,
on.
this one, it's an alley, so it's good,
Yeah,
but
so it's good.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I'm
So
just
what's
saying
being
there are
proposed
some.
doesn't put any restriction distance from an alley.
So they could park though, it just would have to be in the driveway area. Could they expand their driveway technically? I mean, is a driveway, could you just pave more area and that still be driveway?
You could driveway as long as it leads to covered parking. If covered parking already exists, and as long as it's not in the front facade of the yard, yes, you could pave more driveway. A lot of people do to add an extra parking space.
So that's a solution for some people who might be facing some of these challenges would be to widen the driveway, which isn't cheap, but
no.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Ben. And you're a heck of a ball player.
Thank
you.
Basketball and soccer. I play against this guy and you don't want to.
So while we've got this image up, so like on the bottom of the screen where we've got the little red truck, you could have a boat parked right there and that would be okay, just right off the alley. You don't have to have any setback or anything like that.
No, because if we were to scroll down from that image, that would be considered the rear yard and they would be okay parking there.
Okay, good. Yeah, because there are some of these fun little alleys throughout the Pioneer neighborhoods, and that's where everybody goes to park their things. In this particular one to the north is Third South, and so it's really hard to have driveways on that and everything. So it's incredibly useful. And I'm glad to know that these houses, which don't have driveways coming off of Third South or Fourth South, can park wherever they need to based off of their alley. Thanks.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Abinadi? Thank you, Abinadi.
Thank you.
Okay, council discussion. I know I watched all the planning commissions on this. I read lots of emails. I mean, there's a lot of back and forth with the plan, a lot of back and forth with the planning commission. I do think we have come up with an ordinance that has a really good balance between property rights and safety and nuisance issues. And so I found it pretty appropriate. Councillor Fillmore?
Thank you. I'm sure sensitive to the neighborhood concerns about not turning a neighborhood into a trailer court. I'm appreciative of the sensibility about seeing neighborhoods degraded by homes that aren't taken care of. And I think this ordinance is a good effort. I think it's balanced, it's reasonable. But I am troubled by call it the family emergency exception. That it seems to me that we ought to be able to find some way to craft an exception where there's an immediate need or emergency, particularly for a family member, to stay more than a week. I guess I want staff to readdress that, get creative and see if we can't find a way to do that. I understand that long-term there could be safety issues. I understand that it could be abused. I understand that there are potential problems in terms of just a variety of things if it's abused, but it seems to me we ought to try to find some way to accommodate legitimate family emergencies that go beyond 1 week. I understand that creates enforcement questions, right? But I'd like to see us make an extra effort to see if we could do that.
Councillor Hanley.
Yeah, I agree with Mr. Fillmore. I think it just seems to me that in a community where we really prize family helping family in times of desperate situations, that we are kind of hurting ourselves if we're overly strict on that. I don't know. I'm just sort of guessing here, but I'm wondering if like a month is reasonable. You go to the house, you have the conversation with the owner. If there's no pressing need for them to be there, I suppose it gets too subjective. So you just say, well, you will be back in 30 days. And that's a reasonable amount of time for you to find some alternative housing. And as long as everything else is being enforced in terms of the sewage and the location of the trailer, I don't see that feels reasonable to me.
A question I have is, we already deal with enforcement issues, and one of our huge enforcement issues is that people lie. And we can't do anything about it. We have so many cases where people just say, oh, no one's renting here. Oh, no, we only have 3 people living here, not 10. Or like, we deal with this, enforcement deals with this on a daily basis. It's just such a hard thing to not be abused. Like, I think the actual amount of people who would utilize this would be an extremely small percentage that were actually family in an emergency situation. I think you'd be looking at 90% would be abusing it in some way.
Could I?
Councillor Hanley.
Yeah, I just don't like crafting ordinances on the basis of suspicions about people being dishonest rather than on the cases where I just think it's a reasonable extension of the time. It's still the same rule. I just think we're giving them a little more time to make adjustments. I can't believe anybody wants to live in a trailer on somebody's property. So I have to believe that most people who are in that situation are there because they're looking for alternatives. So I'm just trying to give a little bit of flexibility to find it.
Can I make a comment? And I don't know what the solution is. I really don't. I guess I would encourage you to think back on all the discussions and debates we had with neighborhoods about where ADUs are or aren't appropriate and the impacts they have to property values as you consider what this really looks like, what it could potentially look like. And the only thing I can possibly think of that maybe is a compromise is maybe there's a permit. Maybe there's a special permit that we craft that someone has to come in and apply for that presents some extenuating circumstance, identifies what the time period is going to be, what the relationship is of the individual that's staying there. Somehow they verify or certify whatever. They are able to show us what they're going to do for power connection. They're able to show us what they're going to do with sewer. I don't know, whatever. Maybe there's a whole list of things we could go to try to mitigate the negative possible impacts on property values or long-term, because here's my concern. There are some specific situations where someone has a legitimate, honest, heartbreaking issue. And I think that's what we're all responding to. There's also the people that are going to take advantage of this that are going to say, well, yeah, that was Fred for this month. Joe is in the same situation. He had to move in for this next month. And Sally is moving in after him for the next month. And they're all my family. And there are people that are going to abuse that situation, create a kind of an environment that I don't know how we're going to dig ourselves out of once we open it up. So anyway.
Well, I like the idea of a possible permit approach, and maybe you simply put limits on it that you can like do that with one family situation a year or something, but so it doesn't become a perpetual ADU kind of concept. The other possibility, I suppose, is what we do with the ADU ordinance, which was to get surrounding neighbors' consent.
Chair McCain.
Yes.
Could I make
Brian.
a couple comments?
Yep.
Yeah. In some ways, some of my comments are similar to Keith's. I think you run into a couple of issues. Your point was spot on about code enforcement, right? We've been talking about that for years. And one of our number one problems with occupancy generally is the issue that people tell us all the time that they are family members when they really aren't. Which runs into a couple of solutions. One is that if the issue is just that there's this feeling that the 7 days is not long enough and that there are situations where it needs to be longer than 7 days, one solution is to just figure out what that time period is and make it apply to everybody. It's 30 days for anybody instead of 7, because the likelihood is if you make it 7 days for some people and 30 days for other people, it'll just be 30 days for everybody. With the exception perhaps of this permit idea, which I was also going to suggest that Keith brought up. There is a possibility of making somebody come in and apply for a permit in advance, and you only get the extra time if you have the permit in hand when code enforcement shows up. If you're going to do that, though, I think you have to answer 2 questions, not just one. One is who can get one. So what are the acceptable relationships? Second cousin, first cousin, son, daughter, what are the acceptable relationships? And the second question is, what are the circumstances that actually trigger, what is an emergency or a hardship? And again, this is probably too personal as far as weighing on this subject, but I lived in a neighborhood for years where around the corner, there was a trailer on the property that the owner's son lived in and sold drugs out of. And everybody in the neighborhood knew it, and it was an ongoing situation for years. So I think just answering the question of do they have the right relationship is probably not enough. And that's going to have to be, in order for it to not just be an open-ended discretion question for development services, which doesn't really work for legal reasons, the council is going to have to be the ones who determine what the criteria are for the situation that creates the exception.
Feel like I'm sitting through my 3rd or 4th planning commission on this. Any other comments? Councillor Whipple.
So I've also been looking at the code where we've got the development standards for travel trailer parks, which seems like that would be a good option if you've got an RV and a family who needs to be someplace temporarily. You park your RV over in a designated spot instead of having it on your property. right next to your house. I don't know how many of those travel trailer park things we have set up in Provo or how accessible they are, how much it costs to park your thing there. But if you're parking your RV there for the month or however long it is that you need to be using it, then you don't have to worry about the power and the sewer, the accessibility, the parking. That's the place that's designated for that kind of use. So I think that may actually be the solution to this problem that we already have, even though that doesn't help me with my daughter. The other thing that I wanted to think about just a little bit more goes back to Paul Evans' comment that you have to provide the off-street parking if you're going to operate one of these things from your property. I think that you shouldn't be planning on parking it on the street the whole time if you're using that, but I don't think you should have to provide the parking on your own personal residential lot for it. There are other options where you can go and pay to store it in one of these storage lots that's appropriate for RVs or boats or things like that. So I wouldn't want to require that if you own a boat, you have to have a spot on your property to do it. It would just simply be that you follow the necessary laws for parking it on your property if you can, or if you're on the street that you're moving it or that you're not blocking the sightlines or whatever that particular ordinance says. So that's why I'm not inclined to change this for that particular concern.
I know I do really like the safety issues of this. A house was just built on the corner by me. So I pull onto Canyon Road many times a day. And what's interesting is the sight lines, I think the city is 12.5 feet, right? And the sight lines of the diagonal are met with this home, but they put a fence up. And because there's no park strip, I can't see. I have to pull halfway into the turning. I have to pull halfway into the oncoming traffic to see left and to see if anyone's coming, because there's not that buffer of the parking strip and the sidewalk's really narrow. It's like 4 feet. But, and I drive around the city a lot, and there's multiple places that always have a boat parked that I can't see either. I'm having to move way into the intersection to see past it. The safety things are an issue, and that's a lot of the emails that I received. And I'm really happy that this is going to address that. And that's the one concern I have with the people that move their boat or something every 72 hours is they still are often creating a safety issue, whether it's coming out of a driveway or coming into an intersection, people biking, walking, cars driving. It is a safety issue. Councillor Hanley.
Yeah, I'll just try to move things along here. I'll make a motion that we accept this ordinance, but that we change the requirement maximum stay from 1 week to 1 month.
May I ask a question about that?
Sure.
Would you keep the total amount of time for the year at 1 month as well?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, seeing there's no second on that, or is there?
Well, excuse me, are you defining that in terms of an emergency or just anybody for any reason, anytime?
Yeah, I think well, I have a second alternative if this is not palatable, but I think rather than making the zoning have to go into that nuance, which I think is too complicated from a zoning enforcement perspective, I would just say, let's just make it uniform, kind of like what Brian was saying, just make it 1 month. I think that's cleaner and simpler.
And thereby bypass the permit process.
Well, that's the alternative. If the council is not in favor of extending it to 1 month in that sort of fashion, I would say I would make a motion that we craft a permit process.
I would second you on 2 weeks and up to 2 weeks a year.
Oh, this is a negotiation.
I say, going back to our motion training.
I didn't know that's how it worked, Catrice. Chair McKay.
This would be the perfect time to wait for a second. If there is a second, then make an amended motion to change it to 14.
Yeah.
I'm inclined to second it. I think I agree with your rationale, but I am interested to hear from the city if we're opening ourselves to some kind of liability for saying that a trailer can park on a property for 30 days, if there's a legitimate safety or sewage or, a public works or safety concern that 1 week versus 1 month was thought through. And that's what I was trying to ask for earlier. I don't know that I understand if there is a legitimate safety concern that goes beyond a week for some reason, but not beyond a month.
I'd certainly welcome their perspective on that, although I want to clarify that everything else in this ordinance should stay put. So I do think if there's no sewage compliance, no go, right?
Yeah, and I'm not an expert, but I just, was having a conversation back there and I'm thinking, if I'm living out of that, my water usage changes dramatically, right? If I'm in that situation, I'm probably not camping, so I'm not buying paper plates. So that means I'm washing every dish. I'm showering, in it every day. I'm washing my hands. I'm flushing toilets. And I think the water usage goes up exponentially in that kind of a situation. And I don't think they're going to store their sewage there for a month. So at some point after a week, maybe 2, that's going somewhere. And I just don't know that I like the prospects of where it could potentially be going. I think that's a real concern.
And I've listened to planning commission on this, and that was a problem. Like, you can't babysit that either.
Of course not.
Like,
there's no way. It's impossible.
And
some guy is out there.
Enforcement knows better
Somebody's
than
out there in the
anyone.
middle of the night, and just whatever happens, happens.
Yeah. Yeah.
Are we discussing the motion, or are we still waiting for a second?
I think we're still waiting for a second because Councillor Shipley said he was inclined to, but didn't.
Inclined, but that didn't. Well, it just made me think there are, Public Works has thought this through, and I think there was some compelling reason not to go beyond a week that had to do with safety concerns. And that seems persuasive to me at this point.
So I'll withdraw the motion, although I'd like to make another one, but I see other people wanting to comment.
I got a quick question. Okay, so the proposed thing that we got right now is that it can be there for 7 days, and then you have a break, but it can be up to 30 days in a year. That's right?
Yep.
Could they be there for 7 days and go, drive off, empty their black water at an appropriate location, and then come back?
I was going to say, Scott can answer too, but from my perspective, the way it's written, they'd have to not occupy it for at least 1 day in order to reset the 7 days.
So camp out at the Walmart
Maybe I was missing that
parking
part,
lot.
but that may be right. So I don't know if we can pull up the actual text that we have, or Benedict has it here.
The text.
Or the text.
3B.
Right, so
Like, the intent of this ordinance isn't to house the unhoused. It's, it's in-laws visiting with their camper, going around the country, and they're going to stay a week, or friend, family, whoever. But there's people who are traveling in their RV.
Right there. So yeah, no more than 7 consecutive days. So that would indicate that after 7 days, they'd have to be off of the property for at least a day before they come back onto the property.
So I'll make a different motion. I'm just trying to help us make decisions. I move that we accept the ordinance with 2 changes. One is that we increase the occupancy of the recreational vehicle to 14 days, and that we have staff come back at a future meeting to discuss the parameters of a possible permit program
For emergencies.
I'll second that.
I just want to clarify, Councillor Handley. So you're saying amend the motion for passage tonight with a 14-day limit that would apply to anybody, but then a future add-on solution that might that would add permits for certain emergency situations.
Correct.
By the way, is that 14 days per year? Or
I would still have the 14, that right here, it says not more than a total of 30 days in any calendar year. Frankly, you know, I don't, seems like 7 days. I have family vacations that go longer than 7 days. If I'm having family come and stay, that seems a little, that's how I just, there's lots of reasons why that felt short to me, but 30 days total for the year, I would say is still a reasonable. So in theory, this could only happen twice in a year.
I have concerns about the emergency permit part, and it seems like just like so many, how do you define a family? How do you deal with the sewage and everything, and nobody treat the sewage incorrectly for a month or an emergency, however long that becomes in a permit? We've had such issues with enforcement, and there's such a history there. And from all the enforcement officers, it's just a can of worms, I think, that is dangerous. I think it's so unsafe.
I have another question. So this is talking about a recreational vehicle occupied. This does not address multiple recreational vehicles being occupied on a property at the same time. Have we run into this? What are we thinking on that? And we have the as a definitive article. So if we've got somebody coming in, family stays for a week or the 30 days total, but another branch of the family comes in with a different RV, is this just applying to any RV that's on a property or particular RVs?
So the intent was for any RV. I don't know if that would be a grammatical fix to it, to say any recreational vehicle may not be occupied.
And would we want to say that no more than one recreational vehicle could be occupied at a residential property, even if you've got room on there for 4 of them?
We could certainly add that
Keith is
in.
nodding yes.
Yeah, I think that's a fair change to make to this.
I was just getting information right there. I'm still mulling it over. Since the subject property that our neighbors here were complaining about has 2 different RVs with people living on it, we know that it's possible for somebody to park 2 different things on their property and try to have people living out of it. And I think it's reasonable to say, if you're going to have somebody dwelling in an RV temporarily on your property, it's only 1.
I'm going to make an amended motion that
Did we get a second? Okay.
So I said it correctly, right?
Yes.
Amended. I'm going to make an amended motion that we include the language about 1 recreational vehicle at a time, and that we accept the ordinance as is with that change.
I think you did a substitute, not an amendment, unless you were still taking the 14 days from George.
I think that's correct, but the motion is still fine. I think it's just technically a substitute motion instead of an amended motion, because you're completely changing, you're doing something completely.
I apologize.
But that's fine.
Substitute. I'm worried about I don't want to think about, I just worry about the 14 days with the sewage thing. I think the sewage thing's a huge issue.
I took that idea from you.
I know. All right. I want to do it. Like there's things like there's so many what ifs or could be, but Rachel makes a great point that there are places for RVs to go that have hookups and electricity and safety and the system. There's no system at any house for this. It doesn't exist.
All right. So if I understand your substitute motion, it is that we adopt this as it is with the change that we clarify that only 1 recreational vehicle may be occupied on a property at a time, and the total amount of time that any recreational vehicle on a property could be occupied is that 30 days.
7 days at a consecutive day, 7 consecutive days,
but-
total of 30 for the year.
Perfect. In that case, I second that motion, provided I understood it correctly.
Yes, you do.
Okay, you got that?
Okay, so any discussion on the motion?
Yeah, I guess the only reservation I have is that we're presuming what Public Works has said. Maybe we ought to get some expert advice on the 1 week versus 2 weeks on sewage.
I think we pass this and come back to it if we're wrong. We can always change it. Let's get
Okay,
it done.
Should we take a vote?
I mean, that's my opinion, but
Love it. All right, we're going to take a vote on the implied motion, on the substitute motion by Catrice McKay. All right, Counselor Fillmore,
Yes.
Counselor Handley,
No.
Counselor Shipley,
No.
Counselor Hoban,
I guess I got to make sure I understand the motion here. I'm confused now because we got 2 no's and now I'm like, wait, what happened? Can we restate the motion for me, please? Heidi, hello.
Never talked before. Okay, my understanding is the substitute motion is to clarify that only one recreational vehicle can occupy a property at one time for 7 consecutive days. And everything else remains.
Yes.
Counselor McKay, yes. Counselor Whipple,
yes.
And Counselor Ellsworth is excused. All right, so that passed 4-2 with Ellsworth excused.
Okay, with that, Chair McKay, I guess as Councilor Whipple opened that can of worms, I've been looking at this and visualizing several different scenarios that need to be addressed with that amendment. So I would propose at this point that we either need to put this item on hold and continue to the next item while staff works on language to do what you just asked us to do and come back to it later in the meeting, or that we continue it to the next meeting in order to address that.
Okay, well, it shouldn't be that big of a language deal. Should we just do it now and you can let us know when it's ready?
We can sure give it a try. But there's a lot of scenarios between one vehicle now, one vehicle later, 2 vehicles at the same time.
The intent was just that only one vehicle at a time.
Right.
Right. Okay.
Right.
What do you recommend, Brian?
I'm happy to give it a shot.
Okay, thank you. We will follow up on that.
Okay.
All right. An implied
Scott and
motion on
Bennett, I need
ordinance.
to hang around though.
Yeah, you have lots of spectators here. Okay, and we'll move on to an implied motion on ordinance enacting procedures and requirements related to our agricultural protection areas. And this is a citywide application presented by Brandon Larson, our planning supervisor.
Good evening, council. So we in the city obviously have a little bit of agricultural land left and want to do what we can to preserve it. And one of the great tools the state's given us for agricultural preservation and protection is agricultural protection areas. And those laws are spelled out pretty well in chapter 14, or rather 1741 of the state code. There's a few things in the state code that are deferred to the city, a few decisions such as the number of acres, continuous acres that need to be included in agricultural protection area, along with who's going to process these applications. So what we've got before you here is a text amendment to kind of set us up to be able to approve agricultural protection areas in our city. So first off, agricultural protection areas are really helpful in that they place strong limits on nuisance claims. Title 7 of our city code addresses nuisance claims, and this proposal that we have before you would help agricultural protection, agricultural operations, help them if a nuisance claim was made against them. An agricultural protection area also freezes zoning, so there's no moving goalpost or so to speak for agricultural protection areas. They can rely on the requirements that were rely on the requirements that were in effect at the time the APA was approved on their property. Also, there's some noticing requirements that go along with this. For instance, a subdivision, if a subdivision is approved near an APA, they have to put a notice on their plat warning future property owners of nuisances, noise, smell, so forth, if they want to live in that subdivision, which is next to an agricultural operation. So the city needs to be cognizant of its ordinances and regulations and make sure that it's viable, makes these types of agricultural operations viable. So those are some of the things that APAs do for ag operators. What we're proposing here in our text amendment is number one, that we follow the requirements in the state code, as they're spelled out pretty well again in that section, in that chapter I referenced earlier. But we do want to designate development services as that department that would process these applications and then bring them to you for final approval. These are legislative in nature, and so you need to be the decision maker on these. Our proposal to you on an area requirement is 10. There was some discussion about 5, and staff, as it noted earlier, doesn't have a problem with a 5-acre minimum. These agricultural, the text amendment also would give you the ability to cut out like utility corridors and roads if they're on a map. If you have a planned roadway or utility corridor, you can cut those out of an APA before you approve it. Also, we have included provisions that would give ag operators who have an APA protections against nuisance claims in Title VII or other sections of the state code. So that's in a nutshell what's included in the text amendment. It again facilitates the APAs in the city. It gives us a minimum acreage to work with. We have a pretty slimmed down ordinance because most of the requirements are in the state code, and we're including a new small chapter to Title 15. And so again, you saw this earlier, subsection, Section 30 again tells us that you have to have 10 acres and you have to be in green belt. We thought that was wise because that's proof to the city. If they have green belt status with the county, that means they have agricultural, they're in agricultural production. As I noted earlier, in our previous meeting, Planning Commission wanted to have the Agricultural Advisory Board review these before it went to the Planning Commission. And that means that it would also, so you'd have a path of Ag Advisory Board, Planning Commission, and then it'd come to you. So you'd have 2 approval bodies looking at this before it ever came to you for a final decision. So with that, we think this is a really good tool for agricultural preservation. We feel like this is something that is a really needful thing in the city. We want to do our best to preserve the agricultural land we have left. And so we recommend approval of this one. And again, leave to your discretion the area minimum for continuous area minimum for agricultural protection areas. And if you have any questions, I'm here obviously to answer those.
Thank you, Brandon.
Yep.
So just to clarify, staff would be okay if it went down to 5. I just want to clarify that.
I'm not aware of any reason why. I mean, in fact, the state code seems to I'm trying to remember if there's a state code or other cities. I've seen examples in either the state code or other city jurisdictions where they seem to give preference to intense agricultural operations. And
Right.
so we don't feel like, if someone's smart enough and operating in a way that's not going to harm the health and safety of the citizens, why not give them an opportunity to have an intensive agricultural operation?
Okay, and once again, with this, it goes through two boards of approval, so to speak. And none of this is guaranteed. It can be case by case approved.
Yes,
There's
exactly. This
no-
is not a check the boxes
Okay.
process like
Okay.
a subdivision plat or a project plan application, anything like that. It's more akin to like a zoning, a zone map amendment. You
Okay.
have pretty broad discretion in approving these.
Okay, thank you, Brandon. Any other questions for Brandon? Counselor Whipple.
I just want to be sure I understand. So in our portion on area requirements, it says it has to be receiving benefits of the Farmland Assessment Act. So it already has to have greenbelt status. So it already has to have gone through that application process.
Yep.
So this would, and to get that, they have to prove that it's already been in agriculture for at least 2 successive years before they apply for that.
Right.
So this really would only be used to protect lands that are actually being used as agriculture.
Right.
And if somebody wants to get new land and make it agriculture, they have to use it that way for a few years before they could apply for greenbelt and then before they could apply for this.
That's correct. And it occurs to me as we're talking about agricultural, or as we're talking about greenbelt status, you actually have to have 5. No, it is 5. It was 5. Anyway, never mind. I was diving back in. We used to require 5 1/4 dwelling sites at Utah County. And so I was going to say, we probably ought to make it 5 1/4, but that 1/4 acre was for the dwelling site. So don't worry about that. 5 acres should be sufficient.
Yeah, and looking at our Greenbelt Act there, it says 5 acres and it's got allowances for doing less under certain conditions.
Yeah.
That they would have to meet. But I think I would feel comfortable for our purposes, just doing it 5 acres instead of doing 5 acres or less if they've already gotten Greenbelt.
I would
But
agree.
I think that's just a little bit easier for our people.
Yep.
Okay.
Any other questions for Brandon? All right, thanks, Brandon.
Thank you.
Right.
Okay,
Can I make a motion?
we need to open it for public.
Oh, that's right. Guys, public, come comment.
All right, we're going to open this item for public comment. And I know you know the rules, name and city of residence.
Hi, I'm Jenny Smith. We live in Provo technically, but we're actually in Utah County. We're annexing. We're farmers in Provo City, and we've had an agriculture protection area agreement with Utah County for, I think it's about 18 or 19 years now. And the process that we went through to get there, we appreciate the thoughtfulness that went into that, the law itself, how the county worked with us, you know, the Greenbelt, all those pieces that are in place. And we've had several people ask us questions about, well, you know, can you have, you know, 10 acres is what we're talking about. Can you have a good agriculture production on 10 acres? Absolutely, you can. And someone else is asking us about the nuisance complaints. And we kind of smiled about that when they were asking us, because there's so many things already in place that help. I mean, the city has its own laws, but for agriculture, there's the federal food safety laws that are reasonably new. I mean, updated, and serious farmers have to, you know, meet those standards. We have UDAF, Utah Department of Agriculture. We have, you know, in order to have our registered business. I mean, there's so many pieces already in place where you have inspections and people that you work with. So if you're not aware of that, it's not like agriculture is an unregulated fly by the seat of your pants and see what happens. And so it's nice to know that you don't have to feel like it's all on your shoulders, like we have to regulate this ourselves. The pieces are there. There's many, you know, good pieces already in place that can help support this working for the right kind of agriculture business.
Thanks, Jenny.
Okay, thanks.
My name, excuse me, my name is Scott Smith. This was my better half. We're, as she mentioned, annexing in the process of annexing into Provo City. I believe this is a stand-up move for the city for legitimate agricultural purposes. It's been a state law since '96. As was mentioned, we've been a member, was the original member of 117 acre ag protection. We own 51 acres. And what this does is allow you to farm or farm into the future. We are, Jenny didn't mention this, I will, the oldest family farm and continual family ownership in Utah County. That was determined in the centennial from Governor Levitt in Farm Bureau. And there are some interesting feelings that I've had. And in contrast, a lot of other cities may have another opinion. I'm glad Provo City is considering this, and I really recommend that you approve it, because it gives a fellow an opportunity, or a woman. I got to be careful with that because my wife and daughter are at least as active with the farm as I am. And you can produce a lot of produce on 10 acres or 5 acres. Peaches, your mature peach orchard, you're producing a ton to somewhere around 10 to 20 trees, you're 150 trees to the acre. That'd give you an idea. And row crops is fairly intense. So this produce would wind up ultimately at a farmer market or a grocery store near you. And it's sustainable if you own the ground. But this is one other way to keep the nuisance complaints or the taxes and allow someone to hold on to that ground and do what they cherish. And
Thank you, Mr.
Councilman
Smith.
Handley's been to our farm. He knows what I'm talking about. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay. Any more public comment? All right. Open it up for council discussion. Councilor Handley.
Yeah, I want to thank the Smiths for coming and thank them for being such an important treasure in our community. I'm looking forward to formal welcome into the city. And I think I just want to express my full support for this ordinance and hope we can pass it tonight.
All right. Do we want to make Councilor
Do we need a
Whipple?
motion?
Yeah. Do you want
Oh,
to change
I
it to
thought it was
5
an-
acres? That's the question.
Oh, I'm sorry. I will make a motion that we specify 5 acres.
I'll second that motion. All right. We will do a vote on the implied motion with the change.
Got to vote on the
Sorry,
motion.
sorry. Vote on the motion. Councilor Hanley,
Yes.
Councilor Shipley,
Yes.
Councilor Hoban,
Yes.
Councilor McKay, yes. Councilor Whipple,
Yes.
Councilor Ellsworth is excused. Councilor Fillmore. All right, so now we can do a vote on the implied motion. All right, Councilor Shipley,
Yes.
Councilor Hoban,
Yes.
Councilor McKay, yes. Councilor Whipple,
Yes.
Councilor Ellsworth is excused. Councilor Fillmore
Yes.
and Councilor Hanley.
Yes.
All right, that passes unanimously with Councilor Ellsworth excused. Are we ready to go back to the trailer?
We are.
Okay.
Just
We
go down
lost our
to
audience.
Subsection 3. Here we go.
No, they did not.
Okay, so here is here's the proposed language. I talked this over with Scott and Abinadi. Hopefully this is an instance of great minds thinking alike, because Scott said, as they were sitting over there, Abinadi said, why don't we do it this way? And it was apparently what I wrote. So I think this works. I will admit to, and anybody who wants to read D closely and see if they can think that there is a way to skirt it, I would appreciate it. I read it a couple times and couldn't come up with one, but I wasn't entirely comfortable that I'd thought of everything. So.
What about the total amount of time in any calendar year that a recreational vehicle may be occupied, or any recreational vehicle may be occupied?
Well, the problem is, I think if you change it to a or any, you run the risk that you could have one occupied for 30 days and another one occupied for 30 days.
So total doesn't solve that.
I don't think so. I don't think it solves that if you say the total time that a vehicle, because somebody could argue.
So the total time of
vehicle means the
occupation?
one vehicle.
By any amount of vehicles.
Yeah, I mean, that would be, we could say the total time of occupation in a calendar year for one or more recreational vehicles on the same lot may not extend. I think we're just substituting
better.
occupation for may be occupied, but I don't oppose that if that reads better to you. I think we're good, but I just wanted to throw that out there, that if there's other suggestions, we're happy to consider.
Okay, so Brian, now can I just do a vote on the implied motion, or do we need to do a vote on the substitute motion?
Well, we voted on the substitute motion already to direct
now-
staff to do this. I think that we ought to, I think there should be if you like this language, there should be a motion to amend the implied motion to include this language. And you should vote on that before voting on the implied motion to formally accept this language.
Okay, we are going to take a vote on,
So a motion first.
sorry.
So somebody needs to make a motion to accept this language into the ordinance.
Okay, I'm going to make a motion to accept this. What again? What?
Language.
Language into the ordinance.
Second.
Okay, so Counselor McKay, yes. Sorry, discussion. All right, so now we're going to vote. Counselor McKay, yes. Counselor Whipple?
Yes.
Counselor Ellsworth is excused. Counselor Fillmore?
Yes.
Counselor Handley?
Yes.
Counselor Shipley?
Yes.
Counselor Hoban?
Yes.
All right. So now we are going to call for a vote of the implied motion. Counselor Whipple?
Yes.
Counselor Ellsworth?
Is excused.
Counselor Fillmore? Counselor Hanley?
Yes.
Counselor Shipley?
Yes.
Counselor Hoban?
Yes.
And Counselor McKay, yes. So that passes unanimously with Counselor Ellsworth excused. All right. Next, an applied motion on a resolution regarding year-end appropriations in the general fund, stormwater fund, airport fund, and vehicle replacement fund, and a transfer from the engineering CIP to airport fund. This will be presented by Kelsey Zarbach, budget officer.
Good evening. So on June 6th, during work meeting, we came to you with 8 different appropriation requests throughout the entire city. Thank you. This is great. So this chart may look familiar to you, but this is the list of the different appropriations that are being requested, including a transfer from the engineering CIP to the airport CIP. I can run through each one of these as a reminder. And then right now, the way that the ordinance, I can't remember if it's an ordinance or resolution, the way that it's structured is that all of these are listed in different parts. So if there's anything that you disagree with and want to remove, it should be straightforward. Otherwise, it's all there so that it would only require one vote if you wanted to move forward with everything. So the first item here is an appropriation of $265,000 in the general fund in the streets division. And this is due to the unprecedented amount of snowfall that we had this winter. They ran out of budget because of salt and overtime expenses. And the funding source for this appropriation would be general fund balance. The second appropriation is in the stormwater fund for $550,000. That was for the spring runoff mitigation. And that would be first out of the stormwater fund balance. The third item is an appropriation of $439,000 in the airport fund. The main driver for this is the need for interfund loan interest expense. There are loans in the airport fund that need to be paid back to the energy fund, and there wasn't enough interfund interest budgeted in fiscal year 23. Part of the main reason for this is that interest rates overall have gone up, which hurt the airport in this sense because of the variable interest rate that was structured. Then there were a few other areas that needed additional budget for vehicle repairs, vehicle fuel, and facility maintenance for the airport. And this is all being funded out of airport's fund balance. The fourth item is the transfer from the engineering CIP fund to the airport fund for $2.1 million. This was part of the plan that Public Works had originally, is to use some of the quarter-cent sales tax revenue to help fund terminal costs at the airport that couldn't be funded by FAA grants. And so at this point in time, they're asking that the money that's sitting in the engineering CIP, because that's where the revenue is deposited, that get transferred over to the airport and then appropriated in the airport fund.
Okay, so
yes.
really quickly on that one. So this is for the next expansion?
I believe it's for, Jimmy, current expansion to cover some of the unanticipated expenses that weren't covered by
So
grants.
the expansion that already happened?
Yes.
Okay, so it was just cost more than we expected. This wasn't planned on.
Well, in a sense, as she mentioned, it's the plan for the city's portion of funding for the airport terminal is coming from the quarter-cent sales tax, which
And this was always expected or not?
yeah, well, the amount was variable, and I think that's where the question came up. For us is what was the appropriate amount for, and like it mentions here, due to the success, we were able to take advantage of the city funding that was available to make accommodations for some of the airlines that wanted to keep planes here and things like that. So sorry, that's not very well spoken, but that was the intention of the engineering CIP surplus funding, was to fund the city's portion of improvements for the current terminal.
Thank you, Jimmy. Okay, the fifth item is an appropriation of up to $75,000 in the general fund from the scooter revenue. This is to help fund wayfinding and development services. And so they're just taking revenue that the department has brought in through those scooter revenues and just want to designate it for a specific purpose. The reason why the language specifies up to $75,000 is because we're still waiting to see what the final amount is for the fiscal year. And once we know that, we'll move up to $75,000, but it could be less than that. And so that just gives us the flexibility to do it based on actual revenues. Okay, the sixth item is an equipment purchase request from the fire department for $750,000, which would fund breathing apparatus. We talked about this again at the June 6th work meeting, but the fire apparatus includes bottles that contain the pressurized air and the packs and the masks for all of the firefighters. The current apparatus is expiring in September, and they needed the appropriation in this fiscal year in order to accommodate the lead time to actually order and receive the equipment before the ones that we currently have expire. And so that would be an appropriation out of general fund balance. The seventh and eighth items are kind of combined, they're related. The seventh one is an equipment purchase request that there's an outright purchase for a supervisor vehicle in the fire department. And the outright purchase would be $65,000. What happened is Chief Miguel had his own vehicle when he came to the city and he just wanted to use that. And so what the prior fire chief had been utilizing was given to another fire supervisor to use in replacement of that. And so Chief Miguel kind of let us skid past for a few years without replacing a vehicle essentially. And the reason why they're asking for this appropriation now is because they found a vehicle that was available on the lot now, whereas if they waited to order one, it would take 9 to 12 months to receive. And so they're just hoping that they can make that purchase sooner than later. So it would be a $65,000 outright purchase appropriation in the vehicle replacement fund. And then the associated general fund portion for fiscal year 23 would be $13,790 in general services, which would be the first year loan payment on that vehicle. Yes.
Could I go back to the 750,000 for a moment? So
Yes.
I assume that was an anticipated cost that was coming, and you're saying, so if we're funding it now, does that mean it won't be requested, that it would have been requested later and that we're not now going to get it requested? I don't know if my
So to answer the
syntax
first
worked
part,
there.
no,
Yeah.
I might need some clarification, but the first part is it was anticipated. Fire actually applied for a FEMA grant, and when they found out they couldn't get, they didn't get the grant.
Oh,
This was
okay.
Plan B to come to the council and
Okay.
ask for that
All right. So that's
appropriation.
something different than what I was thinking. Okay.
It's-
I
go
just
ahead.
thought maybe it was part of the normal CIP budgeting, but it was because you needed to order it earlier than anticipated, that you needed to make that adjustment now, and that meant that later we wouldn't be
Right.
spending it. But
No, it wasn't ever in a budget. And part of the reason it would need to be budgeted now and wasn't put on the supplemental request list for the 24 budget was simply because of the lead time issue with ordering it in time for the expiration
got it.
deadline.
Okay.
Yeah. So that is the full list. I know it's a lot and they're all together. Are there any questions about any of the specific requests?
I have a quick question on the stormwater one. I really appreciate all the work that the city did in preparing for our spring runoff. And I think are we peaked on that now? Do you know? So my question is, this 550, is that enough also for recovery after those waters subside? Like, I don't know if we'll have any damage for any of the underpasses with the bike trail or along the riverbanks that would require additional money.
I'm going to defer to Jimmy on that.
Yes, when we had to decide the amount that we were going to request, we didn't know when the peak was going to hit. So we did include a little bit of buffer to cover any future costs at the time. So we haven't spent 550. We do have money available, and this would allow us to make any reparations like that if needed.
Okay. Do we also have a plan for potentially excess sandbags and where we're going to put things like that?
Still in development, but yes,
Okay.
it's definitely being considered and thought through the best way to handle that and to help our citizens know what to do with all this.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Doesn't look like it. Thanks, Kelsey.
Thank you.
Council, well, we're going to open this item up for a public hearing. Any public comments? Okay, council discussion. All righty. We're going to call for a vote on the implied motion. Councilor Ellsworth is excused. Councilor Fillmore,
Yes.
Councilor Handley,
Yes.
Councilor Shipley,
Yes.
Councilor Hoban,
Yes.
Councilor McKay, yes. Councilor Whipple.
Yes.
That's unanimous with Councilor Ellsworth excused. All right, next we're going to look at an applied motion on an ordinance amending the consolidation fee schedule and Provo City pay range table. And this will also be presented by Kelsey Zarbach.
Okay, so this ordinance, in the past, we've always combined the final budget adoption ordinance with the consolidated fee schedule adoption and pay schedule adoption. But just kind of make sure that everything is in its place, we decided to split it out with consultation with council staff and legal. But basically, this ordinance would adopt the new pay schedule, which would include the 4% cost of living adjustment in the fiscal year 24 tentative budget. In addition, it has all of the changes to the consolidated fee schedule for the second exhibit. And we went through changes to the consolidated fee schedule at the May 16th work meeting, but some of the fee schedule changes included some updates to parks and rec fees. For example, pavilion rentals went up. The airport parking costs increased by $1 per day. And also there were some fee increases for utilities. The energy rate proposal for the increase is 2%. Water would be a 5% increase. Wastewater would be a 3% increase. Sanitation would be a 7% increase. And then the utility transportation fund would have a 5% increase. And when we calculated all of that out, it would have an impact of $8.72 monthly on the average utility customer bill. And so that is built into the consolidated fee schedule that is before you. Are there any questions? That's just a brief overview. We can look at slides from the May 16th work meeting that have more detail if you would like more information.
Any questions for Kelsey? Thanks, Kelsey.
Thank you.
All right, we'll open this for public comment. Council discussion. All right, I will call for a vote on the implied motion. Councillor Fillmore.
Yes.
Councillor Hanley.
Yes.
Councillor Shipley.
Yes.
Councillor Hoban.
Yes.
Councillor McKay, yes. Councillor Whipple.
Yes.
And Councillor Ellsworth is excused. That's unanimous with Councillor Ellsworth excused. All right, next is an applied motion. An ordinance amending the tentative budget for Provo City for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2023 and ending June 30th, 2024 in the amount of $342,097,249 and setting a public hearing to consider a proposed change in the certified tax rate. And again, lucky Kelsey Zarbach.
Okay. As Chairman Kay already mentioned, this is the tentative budget. Just updating the tentative budget to include some changes that were presented at the June 13th work meeting. There have been no other changes since that time, but just to remind you about what some of the changes were, we had received the certified tax revenue from the county at that point in time, and for both the library fund and the general fund, we had to reduce the amount of property tax revenue that we had in the budget at that point. And there were a few other changes that we had made based on, there was an employee benefit cost for background checks that increased by $10,000 that affected multiple departments in the city to make up for that $10,000 amount. So the tentative budget amount of, I lost my paper, of $342,097,249 includes those changes. And the ordinance before you tonight would adopt those changes with the tentative budget and then put the tentative budget in place temporarily until the council holds truth and taxation and votes on a final version of the budget. There is a portion in part 1 where you can see there are placeholders for putting in the amounts that the council would recommend holding the truth and taxation for increases to the library fund property tax revenue and the general fund property tax revenue. The ordinance also specifies a proposed date for truth and taxation, which would be August 8th, 2023. And I think that's what this would accomplish. Am I missing anything, council staff? Sorry. No, I just wanted to make sure. Any questions about this?
Any questions for Kelsey? I don't think so. Thank you. Okay, we'd like to open this item up for a public hearing. All right, council discussion. Okay, we're going to call for a vote. Counselor Shipley.
Does the wording need to be any different on these rates? I mean, this is just a placeholder for us to discuss these proposed rates. It allows us to do anything up to that rate between now and August.
That's correct.
Okay.
In part 3. Oh, no, we don't need to change anything part 3 because part 3 is saying what the certified tax rates will be from July 1st until the truth of taxation happens. So that'll be fine.
All right, we'll call for a vote on the implied motion. Counselor Handley.
Yes.
Counselor Shipley.
No.
Counselor Hoban.
Yes.
Counselor McKay, yes. Counselor Whipple.
Yes.
Counselor Ellsworth is excused. Counselor Fillmore.
Yes.
Okay, that is 5-1. Yes, with Counselor Ellsworth excused. And David Shipley opposed. Thank you.
Actually, I made a mistake. I was opposed to this. I'm sorry. I was looking at the wrong amount. This was the one I voted no on. Wait, didn't I vote yes on a lower amount
Yes, you did.
than this?
Yes. Should we do this vote again?
No, they can just change my vote to a no. Right.
Okay, this passes 4-2.
All right, I guess I'm confused. Didn't you vote yes on the motion to put these numbers in it?
Oh man, I'm confusing myself. I'm so sorry, guys.
No, he didn't. Oh, the two of you together. Okay.
Yep.
Got it. Okay.
That's why I was confused.
Yeah. But you're, well, yeah, that's fine to change the vote as long as we do it before we close it.
No, thanks. No on the vote.
All right, the vote is 4-2. So it passes with Counselors Hoban and Shipley opposed and Counselor Ellsworth excused. If there's no objection, we will now adjourn the Provo Municipal Council meeting and convene as a Provo City Stormwater Services District by unanimous consent. All right, now we have a resolution as the Provo City Stormwater Service District. We have a resolution adopting the budget for the Provo City Stormwater Service District in the amount of $6,869,489 for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2023 and ending June 30th, 2024. And this is just Kelsey's night. And this will be presented by Kelsey Zarbach.
Thank you. So this is the final budget adoption for the Stormwater Service District for fiscal year 24. The council adopted the tentative budget for this district on May 16th, and then on June 6th, as well as June 20th, there have been public hearings for this item. The total amount for the budget is $6,869,489, and that's all I have. There have been no changes since the tentative budget. Any questions?
Any questions for Kelsey? Thanks, Kelsey. All right, I'd like to open this item for public comment. Seeing no public comment, we will discuss this as a board. So now we will do a vote on the motion. Counselor Shipley.
Yes.
Board Member Shipley, sorry. Board Member Hoban.
Yes, again.
Yes.
Board Member McKay, yes. Board Member Whipple.
Yes.
Board Member Ellsworth is excused. Board Member Fillmore.
Yes.
Board Member Hanley.
Yes.
Now we will, okay, I'm sorry. That passed 6-0 unanimous with Counselor Ellsworth excused. If there's no objection, we will now adjourn the Provo City Stormwater Service District and convene as the governing board of the Redevelopment Agency of Provo by unanimous consent.
We have one item of business. A resolution adopting a budget for the Redevelopment Agency of Provo City Corporation for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2023, and ending June 30th, 2024, in the amount of $1,206,958, presented by Kelsey once again.
this is the last one. Okay, so this is the final budget for the redevelopment agency for fiscal year 24. There have been no changes since the tentative budget was adopted on May 16th. This was open for public comment on June 6th during the council meeting, and then tonight also June 20th. The budget is for the tax increment fund and the new development fund, which are the two funds housed in the redevelopment agency. Are there any questions for me?
Okay, we'll go ahead and open this item up for public comment. Any public comment? Doesn't appear to be any comment online or here in house. So we'll go ahead and bring it back to the council for discussion.
The board.
Board, thank you. I'm glad we have so many lawyers around. Even then, we'd still have to call it board. Okay. Doesn't appear to be any council discussion, so we'll go ahead and call a vote. Chair Ellsworth is excused. I will vote yes. Board Member McKay.
Yes.
Board Member Fillmore.
Yes, sir.
Board Member Hanley.
Yes.
Board Member Shipley.
Yes.
Board Member Whipple.
Yes.
That's unanimous with Chair Ellsworth excused. We will now adjourn as the regional redevelopment agency of Provo governing board by unanimous consent, if there's no objection. And we need to close. We're done. That's it. Okay. Man, I've lost my council legs, man. I'm just like losing my brain here at the end.